right, so I think there's one more kohlrabi ready to harvest, and then I have new ones growing. So let's get this one. Today we're going to ferment. I get this question a lot, so I wanted to make some content for you guys. There's also a lot of information on the importance of gut health. If you're in the natural world, you've known this for a long time, but it's coming out to mainstream too. Netflix did a documentary called Hack Your Health, all about gut health. I found it really interesting. There are 3 main reasons that I personally ferment food. Number 1, gut health. That would be the top one. Number 2, food preservation. I do not have room in my fridge to store things, and I'm not a big canner, and I'll explain why in a minute. And then number 3, taste and diversity. It just brings incredible flavor to our foods. When we can add ferments to meals, I think it makes them so delicious. So I use these things in recipes. One of them is a pasta I make all the time. One of the ferments today specifically for that pasta recipe, and I will put that recipe in the description below. It's so good. I make it all the time. We're going camping, and I want to be able to bring this on our camping trip. So those are my 3 reasons why I ferment. And I always tell you guys, the only way I can allow you into my kitchen is if I allow you in when it's a mess. The doors are open, forgot to close those. So welcome to my messy kitchen where we do life. One of the things I want to say is don't fear fermenting. That was something that I did. I feared fermenting for a really long time. And then I realized, like, once I started doing it, there's nothing to fear there. So when we're canning, and I'm not against canning, I plan to can my own tomato products this year, but when we're canning, you have the risk of, like, botulism is the main risk, and that you cannot smell if it's in there. Now, I still think it's a low risk if you are following the proper channels and learning how to do that properly. I think we've been sort of programmed to fear real food, like fermenting and canning. But with ferments, if your ferment's bad, it's pretty obvious. Like, there is going to be growth of things that you wouldn't want to eat, and the smell would be pretty bad. Like, you can tell pretty quickly. Same with sourdough. Like, I can tell when my sourdough is gone bad because it smells. So that is the advantage with fermented foods. When they go bad, pretty obvious they've gone bad. And then some of the other risks with vegetables being contaminated, all of that stuff comes from those vegetables being contaminated because they are sprayed with animal waste products in the industry, or there's backsplash, what would you call it, like the wind blows and it blows when they're spraying. So farmers take the animal waste, turn it to sludge, and then put biosludge on the fields where they're raising the animals, or just to get rid of it. And that can blow into other farmers who are growing things like lettuce. That's where all that risk comes from. So when we're growing our own foods, we don't have to worry about those things. And when we're fermenting, what we're doing is encouraging good bacteria to grow, and we are eliminating the bad bacteria, so those things can't thrive. So again, that creates this protection barrier. If the bad were to take over, it's pretty obvious. They look disgusting, smell disgusting. Also, there are lots of different ways to ferment. There's lots of different opinions out there. These are just what I do. This is what I do all the time, how we ferment. So if you've got other methods or you hear other things, that's why there's more than one way to do this, just like there's more than one way to garden, and people have different opinions and different likes and dislikes on how they like to ferment. So you've got to get started, and then you have to find, like, what tastes good to you as far as how much salt and how long you like your ferments to go and all of those things, and then how does it fit into your lifestyle. So a couple of things why I prepare this food. When we're fermenting, you can ferment, there's a guideline I'm going to share that I follow, and you can ferment for a short amount of time or a really long amount of time. And some people say if you go over a certain amount of time, then the yeast change and it's a different kind of ferment. But historically, people would grow a lot of, let's say, cabbages in season, and then they would need to store those for an entire year. Those are long ferments. And no one had refrigerators back then, obviously, and I don't know anyone who has a fridge big enough to store a year's worth of cabbage in a fridge right now either. So I believe in long ferments. All that to say, I believe in long ferments. I personally don't notice it changes the flavor. It just changes the texture a little bit because things will get softer as they ferment longer. So I do what I call long ferments, but we do them in small batches. So we go through them quickly and then I top them off. And I'll show you what I mean just in a minute. So we harvested a kohlrabi, and today we're gonna make 2 ferments. We're gonna do kohlrabi, and this is Jerusalem artichoke. Jerusalem artichoke is a root crop. It's amazing. You're gonna hear beeping. There's a guy about to deliver rocks.
Where's he putting them?
Right by the driveway. So you're gonna hear beeping because there's somebody dropping some rocks on our driveway. Again, welcome to my messy kitchen and the noises of life. There's laundry going because I'm actually making a video showing you guys our master bedroom, and I'm doing a little freshening up of it. So I'm excited to show you guys that. So this is Jerusalem artichoke. It is an amazing survival crop. It's very, very nutrient dense. So Jerusalem artichoke, it's really high in inulin, I-N-U, L-I-N, I think. I'll put it right here. And which is great for inflammation. It's great for immune support, weight loss, all sorts of things. So these, they call them a survival crop because if you plant this once, you'll have it forever. I have them planted several places all over our yard. Some in the permaculture food forest as a way. They look like they're taller and they have a little flower. They're in the sunflower family, but the flower is more like a daisy. So they're a good filler in a permaculture landscaping if you need to just fill some spots with something that's really useful. And then I have them other parts of the property too, just like on the borders of places. So you can make them part of your landscaping, and they look pretty. They're big and tall, but they also look pretty. So that's great. But they grow once you plant them once, you will have them forever. Some people say they can be invasive and take over. So look in your area. They aren't in our area, or maybe just because I use them. But some people prefer to do these in raised beds. I will put a link below to the raised beds that I use for other things, and that's just a way to contain them. So that's a great option, but highly recommend this crop. To get your first ones, they're not easy to find at the grocery store. I purchased mine at Azure Standard, and again, I'll put that link below, and got them established here. I have also purchased them on eBay before in the past to get them established. I dug maybe 4 inches deep and dropped it in the hole, and they came right up. So they taste like a watercress to me, not watercress, they taste like a water chestnut to me. Very mild flavor, and they're super crisp. And it's that water chestnut, is that what they're called? Yeah, water chestnut, that texture. And then the flavor is a little bit sweeter and a little bit more, I guess they're called Jerusalem artichokes because people think they taste a little bit like an artichoke. I kind of see that just with a little bit of sweetness. But these are amazing, and we're going to ferment them. So definitely grow Jerusalem artichoke. And then we have our kohlrabi that we harvested. So our first ferment is going to be these 2 things. This is an amazing peeler. These are by Titan, and you can get 2 in a package. I'll put the link below. One of them shreds and makes strings, and then this one peels. And I think we're gonna make the strings for this. And you can chop your food any way you like to ferment. To me, texture is really important, and it kind of depends on what I'm using it for. So this ferment right here, it has kohlrabi in it. You just can't see it. So I shredded cabbage super thin, red cabbage, because I like it super thin. And then I layered this with almost like thin French fry size kohlrabis. Maybe the size of a green bean. So those are in here and they're layered in. You just can't see them because of the purple cabbage. So I have some chunkier versions of this. So on this one, I want to do a little bit softer, and then the Jerusalem artichoke will be our bigger chunk. So that's how I balance so that you can use more of it when you're putting it in foods. It gives you different textures. Thin cabbage, chunky kohlrabi, chunky Jerusalem artichoke, and we'll do some thinner kohlrabi with that one. So these are the jars that I use. I was doing regular jars for a while. I've tried other fermenting things, weights, and all of those, and I have just found these are expensive. They're the Le Parfait. and I'll put the link below. They are expensive, but once you have them forever. Okay, so I like these the best because it's all I need. I don't have to worry about weights and I don't have to do anything else. I just have to use these jars. So this one, and I'm gonna, hopefully you guys can hear this. Ready? Did you hear it bubbling? So if you pull on this rubber tab, you can release the gases. And that's what we want, because when you're fermenting for the first 5 days, you do not want to open your jar. We don't want to expose this to any oxygen. We're trying to get the good bacteria established in here. And when we open it, we're introducing more bacteria and yeasts, which is the main issue, is the yeast. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So this allows you, it's done now, to release those gas bubbles without having to open it. I don't need a weight on top. I put a cabbage leaf on top and that did the trick. That was perfect. And if for some reason you have too much liquid in here, it will bubble out through this rubber seal. There's some more air coming out. It will bubble out. There's actually a little that bubbled out here. And release without letting air back in. These are the only ones I've ever found that do that well. Crocs I have issues with because we get fruit flies. These fruit flies don't even go near them. If it leaks any juice, I will wipe that down. But I don't have issues with the fruit flies around these or getting in them like I have with other things in the past. So absolutely love these. These are a pint size, and so I'm going to be basing my formula today on pint size. I like half pints as well, because again, I like to ferment in small doses, just like I like to garden in small doses. Harvest something, ferment it, use it, repeat, so you don't end up with 15 jars of something. I don't like to grow all my cabbage in a year and then store it up for a year in large jars that require a lot of space. I like to consistently grow a little bit of food all the time, use it as we need it, and make these manageable bite-sized ferments. Use them, add to them, all of those things. So this is the jars. That is our ferment. So we're gonna do that. I took off the greens and I showed you guys they had some caterpillar bites. So I'm soaking this in a little bit of salt water before I juice them. You can ferment your greens. I'm just gonna juice these because I need some juice for today. And salt is a trick if you're concerned you might have something on your plants, aphids, caterpillars, that will release them. I checked these, I didn't see anything, but that's what's going on here. I don't want to waste anything, so this is the top of that kohlrabi. We'll plop those in there and let's start making our strings. So this is great because it just creates these beautiful little shreds very easily. And these go great. I love to make like a tempeh Reuben and top it with fermented vegetables. We call cabbages sauerkraut, but they're all just fermented the same way. The only one that's really different is kimchi. That's a whole different process. All right, so we've got these nice shreds. Those are gonna be so good. Now, the great thing about fermenting too is once you've got ferments going, you can inoculate your new ferments with juice from your old ones just to kind of get those bacteria started. I add to my ferments depending on what they are. So as I'm eating them, if we get more radishes that need to be preserved, I'll just chop them up and add them right to the jar that's already fermenting. And that's a great way to just kind of keep your ferments going. All right, and then it comes to a point where it's not worth shredding them because it just is too hard. There's not enough to hold on to. You can stick a fork in these and continue to shred them, but I'm gonna just chop them up. And again, this is just preference. It's just texture. I just know how I like to eat my foods and what I like to add them to. And so I like the combination of some shredded and some chunkier bites. Some people just like sauerkraut, like shredded, totally up to you. All right, so let's see what we have here, and then if we need to cut up more. So we have our lait parfait jar. We've got our rubber seal. You can replace these, which is also nice because you'll have them forever. I never knew what these were when I was growing up. We always had these, and they would always be missing this. And then they're so floppy and have so much give when they don't have the rubber. Now I know what they're for. They're brilliant design. They've got space up here, which allows for burping, and yeah, just love these. All right, so one of my favorite is radish and carrots. You guys may have, if you follow my social media, you have seen these in my Instagram stories or Facebook stories before. I make this quite a bit. And it's just sliced radishes and carrots. We are going to push them down as much as possible. All right, all the way to the top is the goal. That's why I like these smaller jars, because this is an edible amount. I'll add half of this to the recipe I make, and then I just keep adding to it until I feel like it's compromised. But what I was saying earlier is when you have the juices, when you're fermenting, those can be used for so many things. So I do a fermented bean paste, and you inoculate those with your fermented juice. So I make a vegan cheese, and I inoculate it with a fermented vegan cheese with the juice from my ferments. So it's nice when you have them established, and then you have those things you can grab to do other ferments and inoculate things. It just gets really fun, and you can get really creative with this. You can pretty much ferment anything. All right, so we have that. We are going to add, I just realized I called this a pint earlier. It's a liter, which is almost equal to a quart, just if you want to do some fermenting math. And for a liter, I do 2.5 to 2 3/4 salt. And I use Redmonds real salt. I'm a huge fan. Used to be a pink Himalayan sea salt fan, but that is a huge knocked off product now with fillers in it. So be careful with your salts, because just like olive oils, they don't have to tell you when they're adding things to them. So Redmonds real salt, I'll put a link to their website below. I'm not an affiliate. I just really love their product. So 3 teaspoons equals 1 tablespoon. I can't find a tablespoon measuring cup. This is a liter, and we're going for 2.5 to up to 3. So you can go anywhere from 1 to 3 per quart. A quart's pretty close to a liter. I think a liter is like 0.9 of a quart. Anyway. So 1 to 3 tablespoons per quart or liter. And again, that just depends on preference. I lean towards the heavier side because these stay out on the counter and we eat off of them, and then I add to them, and we want to make sure that they're nice and preserved. If you add too much salt, that kind of ruins it. Obviously, it makes it too salty. And if we add too little, then you run the risk that they're not going to be stable outside of the fridge. Now, if you're going to do these and then put them in the fridge pretty quickly after they ferment, you can go lighter salt. And I just want to taste this one and see how our salt came out. It also depends on your salt too. I was using a different salt. I just switched to the Redmonds. That's why I wanted to taste it, because I was using some other pink Himalayan sea salts, and then I realized those can be dangerous. Now mine were from a good source, but still, I just wanted to switch. And I've used Redmonds for years for cooking and things too. So yeah, it's salty. I would say I did close to 3 on this. I'm gonna back off just a little bit and do 2.5 for this one, because that is pretty salty. All right, we're gonna do teaspoons. So 3 teaspoons is 1 tablespoon. So let's do 1, 2, 3. That's 1 tablespoon. 1, 2, 3. That's 2. Oh my gosh, that ferment was so good. It actually is the right amount of salt. Little salty, but still really good. So that was 2, 1. All right, so if I'm gonna do 2.5, then I need to do 1.5 teaspoons. Okay, we are going to fill this up with water. Now, when you're doing cabbage, you're gonna smush your cabbages and get them to release with the salt and get them to release their liquids before you add any water. And typically you don't have to add a lot of water if you're doing cabbages. I did add some to this because there is actually a lot of kohlrabi in here, and kohlrabi doesn't put off a lot of its liquid. It'll hold on to it. So just know that. But with things like this isn't gonna put off a lot of water. This is radishes and root vegetables. They're just gonna stay as they are. So we wanna fill this pretty much up to the top. And then we're gonna take a leaf and that's just to make sure that all the produce is underneath that water and protected, and just kind of protecting it from the oxygen that can be in the top of this lid. And we're gonna shut it, and we will not open this for a minimum of 5 days. We have to be content with what we've done and just let it rest. I'm gonna shake it up, dry it off really good. And there we go, it looks amazing. So that's as simple as it is. So let's do this next one, and I wanna talk about what can happen to your ferments. So one of the things that you may see on your ferments is white film, and it's almost like a webbing, and that is, I'm gonna say the name wrong, balm or kiln, I'll put the name of it here, yeast. It's a yeast. It's completely harmless. It can freak people out because it didn't look super great, but if you happen to get that on your ferments, it's totally harmless, and I recommend just remove it. But at that point, you need to put your ferment in the fridge, because once it gets it, it's going to continue to just get it over and over and over again. I have found personally, unless you catch it early. And what I've done in that case is sprinkled salt, removed it and sprinkled more salt on the top. But then you run the risk of your ferments getting saltier and saltier and saltier if you keep doing that. And then, you know, they might not be as tasty as you like. So the key is not to open it for the first 5 days. That does a huge amount of protection because we get all that good bacteria stabilized and everything stabilized in here before we start adding in oxygen, and that's where yeast and things can come in. So that helps prevent it. Store them in a cool, dry place. That helps. Keeping them sealed, these jars just make a huge difference with that. The leaf on top helps because everything's pushed below the liquid. It's when the liquid is, that's why it's on the top. It's the top will get exposed to air, and it's just the perfect environment for that yeast to grow. So more air as we start to use these. That is why I like to add and refill or use smaller jars, or I know like if I'm gonna use half of this and I'm not gonna fill it back up, I may only leave it out for a couple of days, then use the other half, or go ahead and store it in the fridge to make sure that it doesn't grow any of that yeast before we can use it. So just some tips there. All right, so let's do, this is how I buy our salt. And then we just keep it on the counter like this, and everybody uses it just like that. All right, this time I'm gonna add the salt to the bottom. Doesn't matter. 1, 2, 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, and a half. All right, we're gonna layer in some of our kohlrabi. And then we'll put in our Jerusalem artichoke. Okay, and we're filled halfway. We can stop here. You can put a leaf and then you could put a weight on top of this too. I'm gonna go ahead and just put extra, I've got some extra carrots here. We're gonna put those in. And we'll do one more. Jerusalem artichoke and see what that looks like. These are a little tricky to peel because they have so many grooves. I don't really worry about removing all the peels totally. Okay. Now I said store these in a cool, dark place. And like our cabin's pretty dark. I just store them on the counter and on the shelves. We're about to rip these kitchen cabinets out, the upper ones. So I have more room for this kind of stuff on the shelves. Our cabin's dark. So what I mean by that is just don't put them in direct sunlight. If you had a root cellar and you wanted to store them longer, or you want to do more food preservation on a big scale, that's where you would need like some kind of cellar mimicked space. But again, we're going for quick ferments here, small batches that we will use. So I'm not super worried about that. All right, this one has less in it, but again, we're filling it with water and that's okay. It'll just mean we have more ferment juice. Okay, we've got our leaf. With this, I'm gonna do 2, just because some of it is gonna float. Because there's space, the more jammed up it is, the less the food will float. I like to sprinkle the top with a little bit. There you have it. Shake it up. Okay, so we've got our leaf on the top protecting it. We are blended. Look at how that looks so delicious to me. Oh, I can't wait to have that super soft kohlrabi in there. So that's it. That is how I ferment, and I'll continue to share this content. If you're interested in it, drop in the comments below if you have any questions or your experience with fermenting, and I'll see you guys on the next video.